Zimbabwe's military ends its intervention, but the nation's economic challenges remain. A look back at an exhilarating and challenging year for African democracies. And a Hollywood actor originally from West Africa reveals a long-held secret. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening, I'm Esther Githui at in for Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa addressed the nation Wednesday, outlining his agenda to revamp the country's ailing economy. Mr. Mnangagwa plans to meet with potential investors in South Africa, his first trip abroad since he took over the presidency after long-term President Robert Mugabe resigned following a military intervention. Mnangagwa also plans to re-engage with Western countries and has promised to weed out corruption, saying it was a major source of problems facing his country. Now, joining us via phone from Harare is VOA's reporter Blessing Zulu. Good evening, Blessing.
Good evening, Esther. How are you?
I'm good. Blessing, you have followed the speech by the president today. What are the key aspects of what he had to say?
Of course, first he thanked members of the Zimbabwe Defense Forces for what he called, and I quote, he said, exuded great astuteness, clarity of purpose, and exemplary behavior in defending the national interest by initiating what has become now known as Operation Restore Legacy. That is the ouster of President Robert Mugabe, which was, of course, led by the army. He also touched on the issue of the economy, which has not responded very well to his president's. Prices have been going up, and he has been pleading with business to make sure that they don't hike prices unnecessarily. He also talked about the issue of corruption, saying, and I quote, "My government will have a zero tolerance towards corruption," and this has already begun. And of course, he also talked about re-engagement, which naturally means that he's trying to engage Washington, which has imposed targeted sanctions on Harare.
Now, Blessing, those are key aspects, right, but how did Zimbabweans react to his address?
Of course, I talked to a number of ZANU-PF supporters and cabinet ministers. They said that the president was hitting the right notes, and they are hopeful that the markets will respond very well to his message of unity. But on the other hand, the opposition is saying that ZANU-PF, that is the party that Mr. Mnangagwa is leading, is known for all talk and no action. So they are saying unless he does fulfill some of the promises that he made, including the assurance that he was giving the nation that harmonize the general elections next year will be credible, free, and fair.
So what is his strategy to re-engage with Western powers like the United States?
We understand that the re-engagement has already started. We understand that his foreign minister met the U.S. ambassador, Ambassador Harry Thomas Jr., some 2 weeks ago, and the ambassador is Lieutenant General Sibusiso Moyo. And next year, early next year, we also understand from government sources that they are sending a delegation to Washington to talk to Congress.
You know, where a lot of people are curious to know also about the former president. What do we know about his health status?
President Robert Mugabe is currently in Singapore. He sneaked out of the country. Remember, around this time every year, he goes there for medical checkup. We have tried to talk to those who are close to him. They are saying that he just went there for a regular checkup.
Thank you so much, Blessing, for reporting for us.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.
Blessing Zulu, reporting live via phone from Harare, Zimbabwe. Now, 1 month after taking control of the country, the Zimbabwean army says its military intervention that ousted longtime President Robert Mugabe is over. But as new president promises to rebuild an economy plagued by decades of mismanagement, the International Monetary Fund says restoring growth will require concerted effort to tackle Zimbabwe's unsustainable fiscal deficit. VOA's Mariama Diallo reports.
Zimbabwe's army chiefs are urging citizens to ensure the 2018 elections are held in a peaceful environment.
It is our hope as your defense and security services that our people will remain united, they will shun corruption, they will be law-abiding, and focus on working hard for the development of our country.
How Zimbabwe conducts next year's election is key, says a former finance minister and opposition leader who testified before the U.S. Congress last week.
The 2018 election is going to be a major test on whether or not we can move away from the past 37 years of corruption, capture, and coercion into a new order, into a new Zimbabwe.
Meanwhile, the IMF says the Zimbabwean economy faces severe challenges, but could improve if structural reforms are carried out.
Unsustainable fiscal deficit has led to severe liquidity shortages, created inflationary pressures, and threatened the viability of the financial sector and the exchange rate regime.
But one analyst already sees a move in the right direction by revising a law that nationalized foreign companies and changes in land redistribution.
The new government has rescinded a lot of the indigenization policy, but not all of the indigenization policy. I think that should be removed completely so there can be foreign direct investment. I appreciate that President Mnangagwa has offered to repay compensation for farmers that have lost their property. I think that's an important gesture.
But Schneiderman also says there needs to be more diversity on the political front.
With the appointment of the cabinet, it went from, I think, 27 ministries to 21. That's welcome. But there weren't too many new faces. There weren't too many folks from different sectors outside the ZANU-PF leadership. And I think for Zimbabwe really to achieve its full potential, it's going to need that diversity of opinion.
U.S. relations with Zimbabwe have been strained over these past decades, but Washington says it has maintained a strong relationship with the Zimbabwean people.
Since Zimbabwe's independence in 1980, we have provided significant development assistance in the areas of health, food security, education, and economic opportunity for citizens.
A relationship the new Zimbabwean administration hopes to build on. Mariama Diallo, VOA News, Washington.
In South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa officially becomes the leader of the African National Congress today as President Jacob Zuma steps down. On Monday, the ruling party chose Ramaphosa over ex-minister and former head of the African Union, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. Ramaphosa is now on track to become South Africa's next president, should the ANC win the 2019 presidential election. The business tycoon must now unite the party. The most powerful members of the ANC, the so-called top six, are split down the middle. Half of them support him. The other half had backed Dlamini Zuma, Jacob Zuma's ex-wife and his preferred successor. Speaking on a media walkabout around Johannesburg, Ramaphosa played down a talk of a divided ANC leadership who might disagree on policy.
The leadership that has been chosen is a unity leadership. It's a leadership that combines the different views and approaches that were prevalent in the conference prior to the election. And we are very pleased with that the membership has decided to give us, if you like, their own slate, their own leadership as the top six. And we believe that with the National Executive Committee, the same will prevail. And with that, we will be able, the ANC will draw a lot of strength, a lot of purpose with regards to executing the tasks that we have been given.
Ramaphosa, a former trade unionist and skilled negotiator, now faces the task of winning back the support of voters and turning the economy around. South Africa's unemployment rate is at 30%. Under President Zuma, systematic corruption prompted two ratings agencies to downgrade Africa's most industrialized country to junk status. South African banking stocks rallied following news of Ramaphosa's win, bolstered by optimism that he will push through policies aimed at putting the economy on a stronger footing. Ugandan lawmakers have voted on a constitutional amendment to extend President Yoweri Museveni's 32-year rule. The debate on the bill was marred by violence this week. Chaos broke out in the chamber after some opposition legislators were suspended. Several others were detained by police. The reason for their detention is not yet clear. In Parliament today, the ruling party used its majority to push through the legislation that would remove the age cap of 75 years on presidential candidates. Opposition parties fought to block the bill. If signed into law, it clears the way for 73-year-old Museveni to become president for life. The Ugandan president is one of Africa's remaining strongmen. He has ruled the East African nation for more than 3 decades. Hours after Zimbabwe's former president Robert Mugabe resigned following a coup in November, Museveni announced he would consider pay raises for the Ugandan military. A top UN official says Somali refugees in Kenya are free to choose whether to go home or stay in the camps, despite many families saying debts accumulated to feed their children after cuts in rations are forcing them to return to a war zone. While visiting Dadaab refugee camp in northern Kenya, a UN High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, told refugees in the camp that the repatriation was their decision and that the parallel social system running in the camp for more than 25 years could be improved. In October, a funding crisis forced the UN World Food Programme to cut basic food rations and cash in Dadaab housing nearly 240,000 refugees by 50%. The UN launched the repatriation program in December 2014 under pressure from Kenyan authorities who threatened to close the camp in 2016. We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. Coming up, are high-profile political changes reflecting real democracy on the continent? Stay with us.
This is a country that I chose to become a citizen. I didn't have to become a citizen. I chose to become a citizen.
I feel like America gave me an opportunity to pursue my passion as an artist.
I really believe that clean eating is a way to a more successful life or a happier life, if you want to put it that way.
One of the things that helps me wake up every morning is doing better, being better.
We grew up poor, and so I'm always focused on helping the working class be able to have a more comfortable lifestyle.
I'm passionate about doing justice every day. I oftentimes say that justice is a verb, not a noun. You know, I believe in action and moving the ball forward.
Now, the year 2017 has been a dynamic but challenging year for African democracy, with a slew of high-profile political changes from Angola to Zimbabwe. But while some of the continent's new leaders are hailing these changes as the growth of a real democratic culture, analysts say they're worried that this is just the appearance of democracy. VOA's Anita Powell reports from Johannesburg.
Africa in 2017 saw bold political change with the unexpected resignation of longtime Zimbabwean leader Robert Mugabe and the less dramatic end of other African stalwarts, like Angola's José Eduardo dos Santos, who retired after 38 years in power.
So help me God.
Although several new leaders were quick to hail their investiture as the dawn of a new era, analysts are skeptical and equally quick to note that the new leaders of Angola and Zimbabwe were, for decades, very close to the president.
The same regime that's still in place. It hasn't changed. The only difference is just the figurehead. The president has been replaced by, in this case, his henchman or his top supporter, his top operator. And I don't think that is enough of a change. A change in the name of the head of state does not constitute proper change.
Rwanda, Lesotho, and Kenya voted this year. And although Liberia's first round of presidential polls were peaceful, the outgoing president sounded alarm bells over claims of irregularities.
At this moment, our democracy is under assault. Our country's reputation is under assault. Our economy is under stress. We politicians must do better.
In Kenya, they had to vote twice after the courts found irregularities with the first poll and the opposition boycotted the second poll. Election-related violence has killed 68 people in Kenya. And then there's the election that did not happen. The Democratic Republic of Congo has pushed back polls for 2 years, prolonging the tenure of President Joseph Kabila and increasing instability in the massive mineral-rich nation. Congolese analysts are pessimistic.
If you are going to stabilize the Congo, we need to go through democratic, legitimate, inclusive elections. But what we've seen for the past 2 elections in 2003 and 2011 is that they did not put in place institutions and did not change the culture of doing things in the Congo. So the entire transition in the Congo was lost because nothing serious was put in place to prepare for difficult times as the one we are facing now, where President Joseph Kabila must vacate his position.
And 2018 promises to bring even more drama. Zimbabwe goes to the polls in its first election without Mugabe on the ticket. And the world's newest nation, South Sudan, which has weathered enormous challenges like drought and conflict since its independence in 2011, faces its biggest test yet, with its first ever leadership poll. Anita Powell, VOA News, Johannesburg.
In Wednesday's business report, U.S. President Donald Trump has unveiled America's security strategy with more details on how it could potentially impact business relations with Africa. It's Africa 54 business correspondent Joel Malandrino reporting from the NASDAQ market site in New York.
President Donald Trump unveiled his administration's national security strategy on Monday, outlining the foundation and priorities that will drive U.S. foreign policy. The strategy focuses heavily on the U.S.'s economic relationships with other countries, arguing that the U.S.'s economic security is fundamental to national security. So, in other words, America First is not just a campaign slogan, but it's now a guiding force in foreign policy making. The document repeatedly drew attention to China and Russia as 2 countries that, quote, challenge American power, influence, and interests, attempting to erode American security and prosperity. Other threats include rogue regimes and terrorism, while climate change has been scrapped. The language also showed a shift in America's engagement with Africa away from human rights, good governance, trade, and development to one that sees the continent as a market for U.S. goods and services. Business Daily points out that Trump's strategy only referenced human rights once in its 55 pages, compared to President Obama's mention of human rights 16 times in a 29-page strategy document his administration issued in 2015. The plan views Africa as one of the world's fastest-growing economies that represents new potential markets for U.S. goods and services. The strategy also framed a U.S. shift from, quote, assistance to partnerships in Africa as an altruistic alternative to what it sees as China's self-serving aims. This newly formulated Africa policy blueprint echoes the comments that Trump made in an address in September to a group of African heads of state attending the UN General Assembly in New York. From the NASDAQ market site, I'm Jill Malandrino, and this is Africa 54 Business News.
It's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54, working in Hollywood as an undocumented immigrant. We'll be right back.
Human rights activists in Paris say Democratic Republic of Congo security forces and an army-backed militia planned massacres in an opposition stronghold.
South Sudan's government.
In Ethiopia, all parties involved in the Intergovernmental Authority on Development and Revitalization Forum on South Sudan say they want an end to hostilities as soon as possible. UNHCR's Libya representatives says the UN Refugee Agency will evacuate thousands of vulnerable refugees from Libya next year. Filippo Grandi, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, visits the Dadaab refugee camp in northern Kenya and tells Somali refugees they are free to choose to go home.
And welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. 2017 was an eventful year for smartphones. Samsung bounced back from its embarrassing Note 7 recall. Nostalgia was a top trend too, as mobile devices bearing the Nokia and BlackBerry brands hit store shelves. One of the most anticipated models came from Apple. The new iPhone X lost the home button offered by an edge-to-edge screen and used facial recognition to unlock. Dozens of people waited outside Apple stores in Chicago, Miami, and Boston, some of them all night before the iPhone X went on sale. Demand for the much-anticipated device has outstripped suppliers' capacity, despite the $1,000 price tag. Next up, a cafe in London is taking barista art to a new level by giving customers the chance to sip on their own self-portraits. The Tea Terrace has become Europe's first location to deliver the selfie-chino, which features an image of customers' faces on the frothy topping of their drinks. Patrons send their headshots via an online messaging app to the barista. The image is uploaded to the chino machine while the drink is placed in position. The picture is then scanned and reproduced onto the froth. The process takes around 4 minutes before an image is presented on the froth, ready to be photographed and sent to all points via social media before drinking, and costs around $7.50. And finally, a restaurant in India's southern Chennai city is trying to revolutionize customer service by introducing robot waiters to deliver food and drinks. At the robot restaurant, a tray-wielding humanoid roams the eatery, delivers food to patrons, collects the dirty dishes, and takes it back to the kitchen. The restaurant, formerly known as Momo, was relaunched as Robot after the founding partners decided to include technology, with gourmet customers can order food using phone tabs that are placed at every table. The demand for service robots is expected to accelerate internationally in the next 3 years as robots become more popular for domestic and personal use. And that's what's trending today. Now, a Hollywood actor originally from West Africa recently announced that he is an undocumented immigrant and a recipient of DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program enacted under the administration of Barack Obama, allows undocumented immigrants who entered the United States as children to live and work legally in what is meant to be a temporary solution. VOA's Elizabeth Lee has more.
Black Panther is not just the latest upcoming comic book superhero film. It is the fulfillment of a dream for Bamba Jambamba.
That's me right there. Boom. I'm the military leader. I wanted to be a part of this movie for years.
As if trying to make it in Hollywood isn't tough enough, Bamba has been living in fear over a secret he has kept until now.
I'm a black immigrant. I'm black and I'm undocumented. There were really a lot of opportunities missed because sometimes I get scripts and offers from outside the country and I can't go. Sometimes there are movies that shoot in Canada and I can't even audition.
The Ivory Coast native is a recipient of Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA. This status means he can legally work in the United States because he and his parents came to the U.S. when he was 10 years old during turbulent times back in Ivory Coast.
The country was divided for a long time. There was a civil war. Thousands of people died.
I have all these sisters from Congo.
Even though he can legally work in the U.S., he's found much of Hollywood to be unfamiliar with DACA.
And they're like, what is DACA? Then I tell them what DACA is. They're like, okay, you know what? Do you have a green card? Where's your passport? I'm like, I don't have any of that. All I have is what the government requires for me to work legally. And this is it, and this is it.
The decision to make his immigration status public comes with professional risks, but Bamba says not speaking out may be worse.
I decided, honestly, to share my story now when the administration decided that they wanted to end DACA. So, again, I just knew that there were no other options for me. So, either go out fighting or go out in fear.
In September, President Trump said he would end the program and called on Congress to provide a solution. This after a promise he made in February.
We are going to deal with DACA with heart.
Mr. President, you made a promise to the Dreamers. You told us that you would find a solution for us. So we just want to hold you accountable to do that.
A petition asked for Hollywood to support undocumented immigrants such as Bamba.
I think Hollywood could do so much more just because of the power we have in the media to shift the conversation.
You've seen it.
Bamba says he did not make his status public because of the Black Panther movie, but it's an added bonus if the film helps amplify his story. Elizabeth Lee, VOA News, Los Angeles.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight, at 1800 UTC, and in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks for watching, and good night from Washington.
Welcome to English in a Minute. When something loses its original shape or form, it does not look very natural or comfortable.
Bent out of shape.
Hey, did you tell Greg about my dinner party?
Yeah, I did. I thought he was invited.
Well, now he's all bent out of shape because I didn't invite him.
I'm sorry.